From the moment we enter this world, we are writing our own book. A book that has no set ending. A book where any and every experience could alter your path. As we live and learn, the things that were once complicated become understandable. Bad choices become a blueprint of what not to do, while good choices become the foundation for a great future. As we live, we are writing the pages to our life story, hoping that the ending will be satisfying. But until the final pages are written, it's no more than a mystery. And while we wish we could control the ending, it's others who will ultimately write the final pages. But what happens when the final pages are blank and the ending to your story remains a mystery? Located in the southeastern part of Arkansas lies a city called Hot Springs, a place that's known for its beautiful scenery. It offers ancient thermal springs, mountain views, and abundant hiking trails. Hot Springs is a place that has had its fair share of visitors. For years and years, people have flocked to the Hot Springs area for vacationing or just to enjoy the scene. It's been visited by the likes of celebrities and even mobsters, with notorious gangster Al Capone making Hot Springs, Arkansas his #1 getaway. Hot Springs is and will always be a tourist attraction, but if you go beyond the thermal springs and even further than the mountain view, you will find a collection of people who choose to call Hot Springs home. April 9th, 1999. The world would make way for Shaquilla Watts. She would be born in Hot Springs, Arkansas to a mother, Letha Ann Watts, but would be predominantly raised by her uncle and his wife. From a young age, she's described as someone who was always smiling and also possessed the ability to place a smile on your face. She would be raised in a Christian household, so she would also know the importance of helping others, which molded her into the person she became. She's described as someone who was loving, caring, giving, thoughtful, and compassionate. But most of all, she was selfless. Hot Springs, Arkansas is the place where she was born and also raised. She would also receive her education in this area. When Shaquilla was 16 years old, she would bring another life into this world, a son, someone that she dubbed her little twin. December 2nd, 2015, the world would make way for Zay'vion Watts. When Zay'vion was brought into this world, the life of Shaquilla Watts would shift. She would now be a teenage mother responsible for a young child. From the moment she gazed into her baby boy's eyes, everything changed. Everything about her life became about him. Realizing that she now had someone to take care of made her a better person, and she strived to be the best version of herself so she could offer the best life possible for her child. Although Shaquilla Watts was a young mother, she didn't allow that to be an excuse not to achieve her goals. Even after giving birth, she would complete her education at high school, graduating from the Hot Springs World Class High School in the year of 2017. After graduation, she would work odd jobs to take care of her son. Now, around this time, her and the father of her child were on good terms. But like they say, all good things must come to an end, and she would hit a bump in the road in this relationship, and they would ultimately separate. From the testimony of others, after their separation, the father really wasn't around much. Zay'vion Watts would then become in the total care of his mother, and she was doing a darn good job raising him. He's described as a child who was extremely lovable. He was well-mannered and even at a very young age knew how to conduct himself around adults, because Shaquilla was instilling in him the same values that she was raised with, and she was raising a gentleman, and in her eyes, anything outside of that wasn't an option for her son. By the year of 2020, Shaquilla Watts would be 21 years old, and a very driven soul. Around this time, she would be a certified nurse assistant. However, she had plans to go even better. She wanted to be a registered nurse, so she was attending school to achieve that. But outside of attending school and raising her son, she was also working 3 separate jobs. Yes, 3. With everything that she had going on in this period of time, she earned the title Supermom, because that's exactly what she was. She was doing everything she could to provide the best life possible for her son, who at this moment of time was about to turn 5 years old on December 2nd of 2020. That day would come and they would celebrate as normal. Now, by the year of 2020, Shaquilla Watts' baby father had come back around, and he was trying to mend the relationship with her and his son. But him coming back around didn't equal to them being back together, because at this moment of time, Shaquilla Watts did have a boyfriend. At this moment of time, everything seemed to be going right for Shaquilla. In fact, she had just moved into a new apartment, and she was getting closer and closer to achieving her goal to become a registered nurse. In the month of December, Shaquilla Watts' family would be hit with a tragedy. They would lose a loved one, and a funeral would be planned. So they would make preparations to bury their loved one and set a date for this to occur on December 29th, 2020. Family and friends would gather inside of a church to mourn the loss of their loved one. But as they begin to look around, they notice that one particular face is missing from this setting. While at the funeral, the family would notice that Shaquilla Watts and her 5-year-old son were nowhere to be found. And with this totally being out of her character, the family would begin to worry. So her sister would leave the funeral in order to go to her new apartment just to check on her. Upon arriving at the apartment complex, her sister would notice Shaquilla's car inside of the parking lot. But what she saw inside of the car made her immediately suspicious. Upon looking inside of her sister's car, she noticed that Shaquilla's wallet was still inside. So an anxious sister would walk to her doorstep and begin to knock on the door. But no one answers. It is at this moment that Shaquilla's sister knows something isn't right here. So her sister Angela would immediately contact the authorities in order to perform a wellness check. The police are then called to the scene, and they gain entry into the home. But when they get inside of the home, it wasn't what everyone was hoping for. Inside of the home, they would discover the bodies of 21-year-old Shaquilla Watts and 5-year-old Zay'vion Watts. At first glimpse of the scene, it became apparent that the 2 victims died from gunshot wounds. They would process the scene and analyze it further, and then ship the bodies to the coroner's office in order to perform autopsies. But although they knew how they most likely died, the autopsy has the final word, so they would wait on the results.
Police say a mother and her 5-year-old son were found dead inside their apartment yesterday afternoon. Our Jay Bird joins us live from the scene with more on where the investigation stands at this hour. Jay.
Yeah, Kevin, as you mentioned, it was about 1:30 yesterday afternoon that authorities were called out here to the Pebble Creek Place apartment complex. You can't see a lot of them, but there's a few extra buildings here. It's right on the intersection of West St. Louis and Wynn here in Hot Springs. And like you said, that is where they found 21-year-old Shaquilla Watts and her 5-year-old son, Zay'vion, dead. Now, Hot Springs police do not currently have a suspect at this point, and they are continuing to interview witnesses around the scene. Now, police have ruled this is a homicide, and because there was a child involved, it does sting just a little more for them, but it also does ramp up the sense of urgency in the department.
When the autopsy was concluded, it would ultimately be decided that they did in fact both die due to gunshot wounds. But upon analyzing them even further, the medical examiner would come to discover that their bodies had been there for at least 2 days, meaning although they were found on the 29th, they most likely died on the 27th. Now that the authorities know exactly how and when it happened, the next question to answer is why. Upon analyzing the new apartment of Shaquilla Watts, the police would discover that there was no forced entry, which means whoever did this to her, she most likely knew them and let them inside of the home. On top of there being no forced entry, Shaquilla Watts had just moved inside of that apartment, and her family testifies that only a small number of people knew where she lived. And with these details being the case, it makes it most likely that someone close to her did this. In the beginning of the investigation, the police would do the normal procedures, begin talking to friends, family, co-workers, trying to find any shred of evidence as to what happened to her. In a small place like Hot Springs, rumors began to fly, and the finger started to point. People began to allege that maybe her baby father had something to do with it. And if it wasn't him, maybe it was the new boyfriend. Now, as I mentioned, around the time of Shaquilla's death, her baby father had just entered back into her life. He was estranged for a while, but at that moment of time, she did have a boyfriend. And to complicate things even further, the relationship that she had with her then boyfriend wasn't exactly great, because the family testifies they had a lot of issues. And with that being the case, the baby father entering back into her life was a cocktail made for disaster. Because while I did mention that she had a new boyfriend, he wasn't exactly new. You see, he stepped in from day one after the birth of her son, and he helped raise them. If you couple that with the fact that the biological father has now stepped back into the picture, well, that could cause a lot of friction. And in some people's eyes, they might view that as a motive, because this type of situation isn't anything new. People lose their lives over jealous altercations on a daily basis. But although this seemed to be the rumor around town, the police couldn't find any evidence to substantiate this claim. They would begin to work the case of Shaquilla Watts and 5-year-old Zay'vion Watts. But time would quickly begin to elapse, and as the days and months began to go by, the family was no closer to getting the answers of what truly happened to their loved ones. A full year would elapse, and then another year, and the police still had no one in custody, and this case would be officially labeled a cold case, at least inside of the public eye, because if you ask the Hot Springs authorities, they say that it's not cold. In fact, the Hot Springs Police Department says they have leads, but they're not sharing them with the public in fear of giving out too much information. But although they weren't giving out information, they would release a statement saying that they did in fact collect fingerprint and DNA evidence at the scene. But to complicate things even further, DNA evidence in this situation couldn't exactly rule out the boyfriend or the baby father. Because they were both known associates of Shaquilla, their DNA is bound to be all over that home, as well as their fingerprints. So in their case, fingerprints and DNA would not be enough to obtain a warrant. And this is the reason why none of them can be ruled out 100%. But I would like to also specify that just because their situation is a common motive for other murders, that doesn't make them guilty. While investigating this case, the authorities would in fact collect the data from Shaquilla's cell phone. While analyzing her cell phone, they were looking through her contacts and jotting down notes of any and everyone she was speaking with before her untimely death. And while the detectives presiding over her case didn't mention anyone by name in particular, they did say that a couple of those leads led them out of town. They would release a statement saying that it is very important to track down every lead and turn every corner while investigating a case. And while they do take what the public is saying in seriousness, they don't want to get tunnel vision and go after just one guy. The year is now 2023, and there's been no new information in regards to the deaths of Shaquilla Watts and Zay'vion Watts. Their case is still an active investigation, and the authorities aren't releasing much. But somewhere, someone knows something, and I really hope you come forward with the information. If you have any information in regards to the case of 21-year-old Shaquilla Watts and 5-year-old Zay'vion Watts, please contact the Hot Springs authorities. Shaquilla's family is laying in wait and hoping for answers. Any type of information, even if you feel like it's a small detail, might be very detrimental, and I urge you to come forward. Again, everything about this case points to the fact that Shaquilla knew whoever did this to her. There was no forced entry. She had just moved inside of that apartment with a small number of people knowing where she lived. But even with that being the case, it doesn't rule out the fact that this could have been a random act. Again, Hot Springs, Arkansas is a known tourist attraction, and thousands of people visit that place every year. So in this situation, the possibilities are endless. Again, if you have any information, please come forward. From the moment we enter this world, we are writing our own book. A book that has no set ending. A book where any and every experience could alter your path. As we live and learn, the things that were once complicated become understandable. Bad choices become a blueprint of what not to do, while good choices become the foundation for a great future. As we live, we are writing the pages to our life story, hoping that the ending will be satisfying. But until the final pages are written, it's no more than a mystery. And while we wish we could control the ending, it's others who will ultimately write the final pages. But what happens when the final pages are blank and the ending to your story remains a mystery? Rest in peace, Shaquilla Watts and Zay'vion Watts. Thank you for being a light for others. I truly hope you receive the justice you guys deserve.